Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people get taught lessons they won't forget. And in this episode, it's all about bad bosses getting what they deserve, guys. So if you've ever dealt with an entitled a-hole Karen of a boss, oh boy, the stories today will put a smile on your face. I hope you enjoy them. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. So this happened to a friend of mine. Someone who I've worked with for over 20 years. Let's call him Scott. This story always gets a laugh out of our group, especially since he does the voices and acts out what happened. Here's the story. In the late 80s, Scott worked at a Burger King while in high school. For the first few months, he always worked the late shift. And as it was the late shift, business was usually slow. The owners were a husband and wife team who, as you can imagine, came down hard all the time on the kids working. For the most part, Scott didn't have to deal with them. The worst that happened is they would park outside in the parking lot at night with binoculars, as they spied on the late crew to make sure they did their job. And that's when summer hit. With summer vacation, Scott was moved to the lunch team. He wasn't used to how busy it was, and he was a bit overwhelmed. His main job was on the fryer. He took care of the fries, onion rings, and chicken sandwiches. The lunch crowd was really starting to build up the first day he was on day crew. And that's when the wife owner walks by Scott, looks over his shoulder, and in a very harsh voice tells him, "What are you doing? Put down more fries," which Scott does. A few minutes later, she walks by again, even more agitated, and she screams, "What did I tell you? Put down more fries. We don't have enough." So of course, Scott puts down more. A third time she comes by, she grabs him by the arm hard and she pulls him around. She then gets right into his face and said, "Are you some kind of idiot? I said put more fries down now." So Scott did the only thing he knew how to do. He filled every fryer with as many fries as it would fit, and loaded every single row with as many fries as you could possibly put down. Soon, the basket that held the finished fries was overflowing because he had so many. Well, of course, after that, the Karen boss comes around, raises her hands in the air, and she starts screaming at him saying, "You made way too many effing fries. Are you stupid?" At which point, Scott had enough. He picks up a mustard and a ketchup bottle, and he squeezes them both right into her face and clothes, and he yelled, "I quit," and then stormed out of there. He said he was shaking so bad driving home, and he was worried the police would show up to arrest him or something, but they never did. Yeah, the cops were probably never called on Scott because the boss realized that she assaulted him first. And yeah, I don't know about you guys, but if she was acting that way towards me and made the mistake of getting all aggressively grabby like that, oh boy, I think I'm going scorched earth on that business. And this person comments, "She's either very brave or very stupid to think that it's a good idea to put her hands on an employee who's working very close to boiling hot fryer oil. Ketchup and mustard would have been the least of her worries with me." With that said though, guys, it really shocks me how some people think that a great strategy to manage people is to be rude and aggressive with them. Talk about bringing morale down, because who wants to work hard for someone like that? Alright, so somewhere around 2007, I was working as a drugstore manager. I was running the entire front store and the pharmacy. The pay was also excellent for someone who's in their early to mid-20s. But the job was also soul-crushing in some stupid ways. A rule came down that cashiers can no longer have drinks at the register. They can drink on their lunch breaks or small breaks, but otherwise, they shouldn't need water. At the same time, they dialed back the AC, so the store was constantly uncomfortably warm, but not technically dangerous. With that said, I had some of the best staff. One lady was roughly 65 years old, and she came to me to let me know that she was on medicine that gave her dry mouth. So she needed me to know that if I took her water away, she would really have a hard time being able to talk to customers. She almost developed a lisp when she couldn't have her water. So I told her, "No worries, have your water and I'll deal with my boss when he sees you someday." Because the guy was running 40 stores and mine was generally not a problem store, he only came by every 60 days or so. Eventually, he does swing in and he catches her sipping on water and asks her about her water. She said that she has a medical condition and that I told her it was fine. I also told him I approved the water. So with that, he pulls me into the office to let me know that for her to have that water, she needs a doctor's note. That if he sees her with it again without a note, we will both get written warnings. He explains this is because not following the company rule can't be a decision made by me. And at that, I'm flabbergasted. He said that I'm just the manager in charge of the store and I can't make my own rules. Like the company literally made me do drills on how to deal with shootings or even bombs, but I can't approve a bottle of water? That it must be an exception deemed necessary for medical needs. So of course I explain this is stupid, but he says I need to follow orders, and I'm thinking, great. So I pull my cashier aside and I tell her what's up. I said I'm really sorry, but can she please get her doctor to fax a stupid note over so we can cover our asses? And that's when she got a little gleam in her eye, and I was excited to see what it meant. Her next shift, she rolls in and says, "You are going to love this." She then hands me about 100 copies of a letter that says something along the lines of, "I do solemnly state that cashier is medically a human being and requires water on regular intervals while working and not solely during breaks. This was a massive waste of my time, and your company should be ashamed of yourself. I'll be recommending your competitor as much as humanly possible to my patients who fill prescriptions in this town for the rest of my natural life. Signed, Dr. So-and-so." The next 40 were identical letters, each with a different staff member listed, as my genius cashier had snagged an old schedule with first names and last initials. The rest had a blank space for me to fill in new hire names, so our staff could all have drinks on the sales floor. My boss wasn't even mad. None of the higher-ups above him ever mentioned it on a store walk, so I assumed it was covered in a meeting. Guys, I'm shaking my head so hard at this post, and I would love to know the place that OP worked at where they had this ridiculous rule. With that said, the doctor is amazing, and so was the lady who will forever be known as a legend, guys. Like, it's one thing to help yourself, right? But for her to think of others and just grab a whole list of employees just to help them out, I absolutely love this malicious compliance. So here's a bit of background that's necessary to sweeten this compliance. I work in the hospitality industry in a small town fed by tourists. This sadly leaves issues for businesses trying to find reliable employees. To try to incentivize those people to find work in town, every business is raising its wages to keep people who actually do their job. So when I got hired here, I went through all the paperwork, signed all the documents, reviewed all the policies of a business, trying to act far more professional than it actually was. I was given policy booklets, signed that I read them, and set on my way through training. All is well for a while until the HR staff was cut. Now, as it goes in this particular business, any responsibility that could be taken on by the general manager is given to the general manager. He runs housekeeping, maintenance, grounds work, scheduling, dining/wait staff, hiring, and firing. If you can think of an area behind the scenes, he runs it. He's also my direct boss. So I'm a good noodle. I work the night shift solo, and I actually show up on days I'm scheduled, and I show up on time. I do my job even. I've received nothing but positive reviews from my boss and his boss. But we're not here to celebrate these achievements. We're here to celebrate what happened when I told him no. So in the summer of last year, I was out of town, picking up the girlfriend from the airport. We had a good weekend doing things that couples like to do, when right after eating my favorite pizza, I felt my stomach rejecting the food I'd eaten. The next dozen hours were brutal. I emptied more out of me than I thought my body could hold. Obviously, I was sick. I could barely pack my bags the next morning, let alone actually move them to the car. It's still bright and early, not long past dawn, when I realized that I'm gonna need a day to recover. So I contact my boss, lay it out for him, and for the first time in over a year and a half, I let him know that my shift that night needs to be covered. The policy book that I'd read like a good employee told me that calling in sick is okay. Calling in sick for one day doesn't require a note, only the second and consecutive days would. I wouldn't have to go to a doctor for a note because it's only one day, so I can rest and come back in as good as new. But I wouldn't be posting here if I got off work that easy, would I? My boss told me that I'd either have to come work or I'd have to get a doctor's note. After 18 months or more, never calling in sick, covering every shift I was asked to do, he picks now to treat me like a child. And I'm thinking, alright, may as well. So I go to one of those urgent care clinics. The nurse gives me a 2-minute consultation. She sends me out with prescription strength anti-nausea meds and 3 copies of a doctor's note because you're damn right I'm keeping my own copy. I read the note and it states OP is sick and can't perform job duties for 5 days. Signed, the doctor. And I'm thinking, why not? So with that, I shoot my boss a picture of the note and radio silence. The man works a 9 to 5. He does not work nights. I have another coworker who does my job on my days off, so I expect him to have been called in that night. So after the radio silence, and since I was still up that night anyway, I prepared my 2 weeks notice, just in case they were going to try to make me work anyway. So with that, I go into work, with a copy of the doctor's note and my notice, to meet people at the shift exchange. To my surprise, I saw my boss, and he looked like crap. The guy looks at me, confused as to why I'm here. Before he spoke, I hand him the doctor's note and said, "Oh, I'm glad you're here, boss. Here's a copy of my doctor's note. I figured I'd drop this off in person since you didn't reply to me in the last 8 or so hours. Can I go home and rest now?" My boss says to me, "I can't believe you're actually sick. I guess I'll see you next week." And with that, I left. The next several days were spent recovering, sleeping an ungodly amount, and enjoying the time off. I'm really glad I listened to my boss and got a note from my doctor. Now, the aftermath of the whole event isn't very exciting, but it was satisfying. The next Tuesday, a week after the incident, I was pulled into the office. I was then asked why I requested so many days from the doctor, how it hurt him to have to fill all those nights, etc. I gave him the honest reply. I said to him, the doctor didn't ask how long I needed. I just asked for a doctor's note, like you said, and I was handed that. I still have a couple of copies if you lost one. He started to protest, saying that I should have corrected the doctor, saying I only needed 1 day off. But I stopped him and said, "Get the copy of the policy book, would you?" I then say to him, turn to the attendance policy and read out the portion about sick days and doctor's note. How I don't need a doctor's note if I'm calling in sick for 1 day. My boss replies, "Oh," and I say, "Yep, so if you're gonna keep pestering me about this, I'm going to go to the owner about this and ask to be compensated for the cost of that clinic visit, and ask that you be reprimanded for not following your own policies. Or you can let me do my job and not treat me like a child going forward." That spells the end of that conversation, and I wasn't bothered again. I still gave my 2 weeks soon after because screw that guy, I can't work for someone like that. Guys, after all the stories I read on a daily basis, it still shocks me that some bosses really think it's a smart idea to mess with their best, most hardworking employee, and this is what the guy gets. So I have never quit a job in my whole life without giving a suitable notice, but not this time. My encounter is with one of the worst managers that I've ever had the misfortune of working for. My family wasn't rich, and I needed to get as much money as possible after I legally was able to work to pay for my school tuition. I worked for a temp agency, specializing in transport jobs. I took as many jobs as possible, day jobs, 2-hour jobs, weekly jobs, and always made my employer satisfied. They trusted me even for the toughest jobs you can imagine. With that, I have one simple rule. You treat me with respect, and I will respectfully work for you. Even doing sometimes overtime is fine by me, as long as the employer is nice. This is a story about me working for a new warehouse, dealing with shipments. We were about 10 young men, all university students, and we would have to work from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. from Monday to Friday. There was no overtime, no extra pay on night shifts, just the basic minimum wage and nothing else. No cash for food, nor gas money. Our job was to dispatch all kinds of parcels into different trucks. It was summer, so it was damn hot. So hot that you could grill a steak on the pavement, and of course, there was no air conditioning. But that made sense, as the doors were always kept open. Not only was the job tough, but the warehouse managers barely respected the safety rules. For example, heavy parcels that exceeded 25 kilos are not allowed to be carried alone. When one of us dared to tell the manager that it was way too heavy to be lifted alone, he would just say, "Don't be a wuss. Everyone here is doing the same job. If they can lift it, you can lift it. And if you aren't happy about it, just leave. You are replaceable." The guy kept yelling the same things over and over in that small warehouse. We were all assigned a different gate, therefore we were all working alone, but not too far from each other. The days were always busy, and we could only have a 5-minute break for a quick crap in the toilets or a quick smoke. The worst was for people assigned at the bottom end of the warehouse. They literally had to run the whole way if they wanted to make a trip to the washroom. And the worst thing is, the a-hole boss barely helped anyone on the floor. He just spent his time walking around and yelling, "Don't forget, you're all replaceable." There's plenty of people begging for a job outside, willing to take your place. And the one I hated the most is when he would say, "If you're not happy, then leave." Like, the job was painful enough. Why he needed to make it more annoying, I don't know. Sometimes, parcels would barely fit inside a truck as it was getting fully loaded. The a-hole would usually yell at us for being incompetent, and he would literally kick parcels, smashing the content to make it fit inside the truck. And he would proudly say to us, "You see, how can this be that complicated? Are you too stupid to problem solve?" The icing on the cake was one night we arrived as we always do, at 2:45 a.m., all of us feeling asleep and no one to open the gate for us. We waited until 3:30, and that's when a-hole arrived, and straight away he yells at us saying, "What the hell are you doing here?" We say to him, we're here to work." The guy says, "The trucks have been delayed. No need for you to be here. Go back home." That's when I asked, "Are we still gonna be paid? We showed up. No one told us not to come." And the guy smugly says, "Why would you be paid? You're not working. Now get back home. There's no need to come unless we call you." At that, we were stunned, and we were damn furious. The a-hole left, and we all agreed on a few things, and this is where the malicious compliance starts. No one showed up at work the next day, the whole crew of 10 people. I received a call from an angry a-hole at 3:30 screaming at me saying, "Where the hell are you? There's work to be done. Get here now." I just said, "You told us not to come unless you'd call us." He then says, "Then what do you think I'm doing right now? Hurry the hell up and get here." That's when I say to him, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but you're not my employer. I'm employed by this temp agency. Therefore, all shifts must be confirmed by my employer before allowing me to go on site. The office opens at 8:30, so please call them and they will call me." And then I hung up. At around 9 a.m., I received a call from my temp agency asking why all of us didn't show up. I gently explained everything, and the agency asked me if I could go there now. I explained that I couldn't as I have to attend some classes. After a short conversation about the working conditions we had, the agency asked me if I could go there the day after. I told them that I could probably finish the week as it was a weekly contract, but I would not be interested to stay longer. They understood. So we all showed up the day after, and sure enough, a-hole was pissed off. The guy starts yelling, stating that we were damn spoiled kids that know nothing about hard work and we take everything for granted. We all just got back to work, and again, he started the same thing, not helping, but just yelling, "If you're not happy, then quit. You're not irreplaceable." And that's when I stopped putting parcels in the truck, and that's when I said, "You're totally right. I'm not happy, so I quit." At that he responds, "What are you talking about? Just get back to work." I tell him, "You just told me if I wasn't happy I could quit. Then you're right, I quit." My boss tries to backtrack and say, "Well, get back to work or you'll what?" I asked gently. And that's when another staff member said, "A-hole is right. I'm not happy, so I quit too." And within a few minutes, the 10 of us just left the warehouse as a-hole kept screaming at us. It was only 5:30 and there was a lot of work to do, but a-hole had no crew to do the work. Only some management staff in the office were there. We left with a crap ton of work to do. I received another call from my temp agency who asked what happened, how 10 people could decide to leave their job on the spot like that. I just simply explained what the a-hole told me. "If you're not happy, then quit." I told them I'm not happy, so I quit. I then added all the safety processes that weren't respected at work. There was no safety gloves provided, no earplugs provided, having to carry heavy goods without any help, etc. They told me they would have a meeting with the person in charge, but to please never do something like this again. And yeah, I still worked from time to time for the temp agency after that. My conclusion and what I learned from that is treat people with respect, and they will respect you. If you treat them like crap, karma will simply hit you. Ain't that the truth, guys? And I'm glad the boss was taught a lesson that day. And I sure hope he got reprimanded after that. Like, I'd be surprised if he didn't, because a 10-person crew walking out on you because you're an a-hole boss is not gonna look good at all. So I work at an office that sells bulk goods to businesses that use them, like retail outlets. Our office doesn't usually have a strict dress code, but we recently got a new boss, who I'll call Ass Hat, who is quite the stick up my butt. The guy's constantly yelling at everyone about basic stuff, like punching in a minute too late or early, or being a word or two off the script during outbound and inbound calls. Dealing with him in general has made me hate the job even more. So as it's getting hotter, I've been wearing khaki shorts to work for the past few days, which is something I've always done for the past few years. No one's ever confronted me about this before, so I figured nothing would change this year, but boy was I wrong. About halfway through my shift, this boss comes to my desk and realizes that I'm wearing shorts, and he's visibly annoyed. He mutters something under his breath and goes back to his office. An hour later, I was called into his office where he proceeds to berate me, practically yelling at me about breaking the dress code. The guy was fuming, and he ended the meeting with, "From now on, you follow the dress code to the book, or you are fired." And I'm thinking, say no more, boss. So that night, I went home and I read up on the dress code rules. There was in fact a rule against shorts, so I was annoyed, but I kept on. And then I found it. There's no rule preventing males from wearing skirts or kilts. And here's where I devised my plan. I immediately ordered a pink and white striped kilt online, as well as matching knee-high socks and shirt. There was no rule stated in the dress code against any of this, surprisingly. So about a week later, the clothes arrived, and here's what ensued the following workday. I walked in wearing my brand new pink business outfit, and immediately the whole office is staring at me. The boss was beat red in the face, and he yells at me to come into his office. He goes on a 10-minute rant about how I'm such a useless employee, that I don't provide any benefit to this company, and that he's going to fire me for not following the dress code to a T. That's when I simply stated that I am in dress code. I urge you to read the employee handbook. He ended up reading the whole thing in front of me, and I could see him getting more and more angry as he realized that I didn't break any rules. I then asked him, "Am I free to go back to work?" The guy looks at me with a death glare, muttered something under his breath, and he just waved me off. And that was the end of it. Oh, guys, like, if I were in OP's shoes, I would be wearing the same outfit until I drove that man absolutely crazy. And I only wish that OP shared what the business suit looked like. That sounds absolutely amazing. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /MaliciousCompliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode where you know Karens are getting arrested and we're all having a great time. So go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.